So how critical is the emissions cap announcement to the Liberals' overall climate plan and their credibility on the issue? The Scrum is here to talk about that. Robert Fife is the Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Globe and Mail. Rob Benzie is the Queen's Park Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star. And Judy Trin is a reporter for CTV National News. Hi, everybody. Good to see you.
Yes.
Bob, I'll start with you because our colleague Marika, in a scrum with the Environment Minister last week, seemed to get the details this is coming. And then during a press conference at the start of COP, it seemed a little bit murkier from the Environment Minister, who was kind of saying, oh, well, the Prime Minister said it would come before the end of the year. How much pressure is on this government to make this announcement soon?
Well, I mean, they're dying from a 1,000 cuts from their carbon tax. Now the Indigenous groups are taking them to court because the deal that they gave, the special deal for votes in Atlantic Canada on the carbon tax, they want the same thing. We have two provinces, Alberta and Saskatchewan, defying them on the carbon tax. So they need a win here. But the problem is they have had really bad luck in drafting legislation. When they're challenging the courts keep throwing it out. And I'm not sure that they're going to be able to be successful on this because there's going to be a really significant national unity strains on this issue, not just in Alberta and Saskatchewan, but the oil and gas industry is really crucial to the economy. And that is, and if these governments take them to court and they lose, we're getting into election period time, and also they've never met any of their targets for greenhouse gas emissions. So this is the big play they need to be able to make those emission targets. But there are a lot of balls in the air that could see this thing fall flat.
Bob's point, Judy, is a great one in that even the Climate Change and Environment Commissioner, the Auditor General's office, basically just said recently, you're not going to make your target in 2030 unless you increase the level of priority you place on exactly this measure, on implementing an emissions cap. But there's been delays already.
That's right. And Vassy, the environmental watchdog, was very clear that of all G7 countries, Canada had the worst record. Not only do we have the worst record, we're the only G7 country in which our emissions have actually gone up since the Kyoto Accord. So the question then is, what the surveys and polls have shown is that Canadians broadly do support efforts to curb emissions and to fight climate change, right? But what happened with the carbon tax is that it shows that, you know what, Canadians are pitted against each other, but can the Liberals rally Canadians, say, you know what, we're asking Canadians to shoulder some of the burden, but now we are going to turn to the big oil and big gas companies to deal with this?
Well, and the main political pushback is around the way in which the sector and the provinces, Alberta and Saskatchewan, interpret, Rob Benzie, I'll say, that cap to equate to a de facto production cap as well, or even a means through which eventually production in the sector would have to decrease, which is why they're going to, I mean, this is the fight. If we thought the fight so far was something, like this is the real fight that they tell us at least that they're prepping for.
Yeah, I mean, and there's lots of theoreticals out there. I mean, we saw Premier Daniel Smith of Alberta and Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland announcing that carbon capture facility, the biggest in the world, the other day in Alberta, which is unusual just to see the two of them together. But that's all technology that's down the road that could affect this cap and could determine how much oil Alberta can produce without breaking the cap. I mean, there are lots of moving pieces here. And to Bob's point, because the federal government has never met any of its climate change targets on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, there's a kind of almost like a credibility problem that the Liberal government has. Canada's a cold country. We're entering the winter now. It's a really, really difficult time for them to be imposing new charges on Canadians, especially with the affordability crisis that we've all been facing since last year or so.
But if we really want to fight climate change, we should be selling our natural gas, liquefied natural gas, to China, to India, to Japan, to South Korea. They want our gas. They wouldn't be burning coal if they could have Canadian natural gas. But as you know, when they came knocking on our door, Mr. Trudeau said, get lost. We're not going to sell you liquefied natural gas. We're going to sell you hydrogen 50 years from now.
Yeah, I mean, to be sort of fair to the government, Judy, in a way, like the Prime Minister has said, we need a business case. Clearly the demand is there. I remember interviewing the Chancellor of Germany who said we'd take it.
The Germans turned it around within a year.
Yeah, they did. It's just that ours is out west and it needs to get out east in order to go there, and it takes a while to do that. But to be clear, the political will to make that happen has not at any time really appeared to be there. At the same time, I think if you contrast this government's climate plan, it is much more detailed. It is more ambitious than governments prior, Judy. How significant is something like the cap to their overall credibility on the issue? And does their overall credibility matter to them politically right now?
It absolutely matters. And they have to have something on this cap because of what's happening in regards to the carbon tax, right? What we've seen in the past is that they are aspirational. They set these goals. They always make the claim that that Poilievre's Conservatives don't have a climate plan, which could be true, but the fact of the matter,
to be fair, they have not each other.
But what
coming in the election?
But what is critical to the Liberals, a critique of the Liberals, is that they don't have a detailed plan. You know, of all their aspiration, of all their goals, the environmental watchdog says there aren't measurable goals in which he could even audit, and it's going to be incumbent on Guilbeault, on this federal government, to come up with not just a cap, but exactly when and how and by what means.
Yeah, and I mean, especially what the commissioner showed was that while they may have specific planks to their plan, a majority of them do not carry with them the specifics of how they will overall impact emissions reduction. So at the same time, we have heard from this Prime Minister, from the Environment Minister, who, by the way, was a climate activist for a number of years, how significant this file is to them. It does seem to me, Rob, and final word to you, they want this to be a big part of their legacy. Is that in jeopardy?
Well, I mean, their legacy could be in jeopardy if they lose the next election. And at the end of the day, that is job one for the Liberals. It's easy to say, oh, we're on the side of the Angels, and maybe they are. I mean, we all agree we want a cleaner, a greener environment. But I think, do people want to pay for it? And I think if I'm the Liberals, I'm looking at ways to make it hurt less for Canadians and help them more so they can get reelected. Because that, at the end of the day, and you guys all know that, that is their biggest priority. A legacy is a legacy is a legacy. Right now, if you were to say what's the Liberal legacy, I guess cannabis. They legalized cannabis, and I don't know what, I can't really point to everything else.
Daycare. If you're a mom, you might say daycare, but I'll leave it at that.
Daycare. $10 a day daycare.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate the discussion very much. Rob Benzie, Judy Trin, and Bob Fife.